Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for deviating from the women's college basketball. Fortunately, we have a resident expert here, so if you have any questions on the game, on the tournament, anything to do with that, please go ahead and direct those to Paul. We got a lot going on, so we're just going to get started with some of the information that we received on a call earlier. We have some folks that were privy to the coaching clinic, and we've got some articles coming out about that, and we'd love to hear some insight on that. So, Ian, I know that you were privy to that call. What were some of the things people were saying about that particular event?
Well, they got to see a lot of. You better turn that echo cancellation back on.
Today, I consider myself the luckiest man alive.
All right, hold on,
hey,
y'all.
Coincidence that guy had me.
How we doing?
Normally we can't hear Ian, and now he's all over it. All right, try that again.
All right.
This is what we're dealing with.
We found out that Texas is working very complex pro-level RPO that they ran a little bit last year and is likely to be a big feature in the offense this season. It's something that the Dolphins run with Mike McDaniels. They ran a version of it a couple years back that we called Ezekiel's Wheel. They have an even more sophisticated version that they showed a little bit last year, and it sounds like they're just tearing it up. They run like outside zone. They have a wheel route. They have a glance route. They're using motion, and I don't think the coaches even care if people know about it, because it's just for them it's a base concept, but there's so many different options and levels to it that it's just a beast, just a bear to try to deal with for a defense.
We've got a, thankfully, question here already straight in. Thanks to Brett Nelson. Now, we've got these super chats. Please, if you don't mind, it would be very beneficial for us. We're trying to get, I'll tell you right now, we're trying to get Ian home. He's constantly making these calls out of a halfway house. So the fact that we can maybe get him a place to make these calls would be really beneficial. And I want to thank Brett for donating to that cause. And we'll get to Brett's question right now. Does Trey Moore have first 2-round NFL potential? Over under on 30 passing touchdowns for Quinn. I like this because this is betting. You love betting, Paul.
I've got opinions on both. Trey Moore the early reports on him are great. I would really be watching him anxiously in the spring game and, of course, in the fall, waiting for that as well. That said, he's got a little bit of a length and size problem to project the NFL as a first 2-round guy. I mean, that's a really high potential for an outside linebacker or edge guy. So he would have to demonstrate, just extraordinary ability as a pass rusher, but also as a traditional linebacker off the ball for the NFL to take him in the first 2 rounds. Because I think he's listed a certain height and weight. I'm not sure he's even 6'2". And so typically you're not going to get an edge guy. You look at the elite edge guys in the NFL, and they're long, they're much bigger, and they're faster. So doesn't mean he's not going to be a potentially great asset for us. I'm looking forward to watching him. And then over under on Quinn throwing for 30, easy over. That's going to happen simply because of the number of games played. You're assuming his health, obviously, with that bet, right? If he misses 2 or 3 games, then it could be in jeopardy potentially. But, this is a guy who could have 30 passing touchdowns by game 11.
Yeah. Thoughts on that, Eric? Where do you put Quinn? Are you with Paul here, our resident women's basketball expert, of over 30 for the season?
Absolutely. I put 25 last year, and then I got blasted by it. I think he had 24, but he also missed 2.5 games or so.
22.
Was it 22? Oh, okay. Well, yeah, it should easily be 30. I'd set the over under higher. And then, what Paul's saying about Trey Moore, he kind of reminds me of the way Paul was describing of a Moore from years past. You remember Corey Moore at Virginia Tech. He was a beast off the edge, but didn't have the measurables Paul's describing as being necessary to compete against NFL offensive tackles. So that was the problem there. But Trey's quickness is showing up against good offensive tackles. That's exciting to see. He's a hell of a football player, high football IQ, very physical. Everything you draw up, it's just the length component matters in football, especially when The NFL guys are well coached. Those offensive linemen know how to get their arms out and use their hands right. Can really mitigate your quickness and your power, your bull rush. You can't bull rush them if you can't get on them. So Trey's got a little bit issues there to answer, but if he can perform well against Texas's offensive tackles, it'll give him a chance in the NFL.
Brett is really concerned here. He's obviously got some specifics he needs to deal with his bookie, as we all do with bookies. They're very specific people. He's curious about the regular season. Does your bet change at all if we're including strictly the regular season, or are we still over 30?
Now we get more interesting because that's 2.5 a game, right? So if you just think about the statistics of that, right? You're really harmed if you have a 0 passing touchdown game. And, Texas may score 50 points in that game. We just ran the ball in repeatedly in goal line, right? And if goal line improves the way we think and hope it should, that might happen. You really need some outlier touchdown games, right, for that to happen. You've got to have a 5 touchdown game. You've got to have a couple, or at least 2 or 3 4 touchdown games for that to happen. Because if you play an early game and you blow someone out, Quinn could be off the field on the second drive of the third quarter, and we're playing Arch, and he's only thrown 1 touchdown. So he's down 1.5, right? You've got to throw 4 the next game to be at 2.5, right? It's just math. So, Brett, I'm glad you amended that. Now it gets more competitive, and then you're betting on an. So as a bettor, I would take the under, because if he even misses 1 game, then you're kind of up the river, right? As a Texas fan, if he's healthy, I still think he'll hit 30. But as a bettor, I would obviously take the under on that.
Eric, same for you.
Yeah, the regular season caveat matters a lot right there. So, he can. What did I don't think he's Mac Jones as far as extending the Sark playbook to the field, where that's what Mac did. He just brought the whole playbook alive. Quinn is obviously bringing the playbook more fully alive. And on that same call that we had today with that source, the Sark said in that clinic that they operated about 70% of the playbook. Now it's already a lot more this spring. He didn't say you get to 100, but he said it's building. The more that playbook comes alive, the more likely that he is to throw touchdowns, because Sark's going to trust him more with the ball in his hand and throwing the ball downfield, throwing the ball in the red zone. But yeah, just one injury could screw that up.
Mac Jones hit 41 in 13 games in 2020, obviously with an all-time offense. But
Devontae Smith had 23 touchdown receptions, I think, or 22, something ridiculous.
They also had Najee Harris, so it's not like they only threw it either.
Right.
So,
yeah, Najee had like 1,400 yards. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So that is still a tough call, in my opinion.
Hey, that's a great question, Brett. And Brett, by the way, I think we all noticed he's a super chat superstar every week. He brings good questions and he contributes. So thank you, Brett. Appreciate it, man.
One of the questions you received earlier this week on Twitter, I believe, Ian, was to do with the defense, a base defense that would be optimal for our SEC opponents. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Well, I was asked, what the ideal base defense would be for Texas entering the SEC next year. I think it's actually more or less the one they've already been running. I think some of the personnel or some of the execution might need to be a little better, but I don't know exactly what the intent of the question was, but like say Texas is 2-4-5 under Pete Kwiatkowski, where they play 2 tackles, 2 edges, and a nickel corner. A lot of people will assume that that's too small for the SEC and you'll get run over. But if you look at the better teams in that league, like Alabama or Georgia, they will routinely play with a nickel corner. That's how teams prefer to do it. Auburn has done it that way for a while. Florida does it that way. They're actually not any good, though. So I don't think that the base packaging of the personnel needs to change for next year from like a big picture perspective. From a what would make this roster the best possible defense in the SEC next year is a more complicated question. And that has a lot to do with how these defensive tackles come along and how the young safeties come along. So that's harder to answer.
Well, one of the things that you talked about earlier was the idea of this dollar package. I mean, do you ever see us doing that in the SEC?
Maybe. The dollar package was the 3-1-7 that Johnny Nansen ran a lot at Arizona. I think that could actually work really well in the SEC some weeks. Like if you're playing Tennessee or Oklahoma, one of these teams that's actually as spread happy, throw it around as any Big 12 team ever was, that would be really useful against those teams. But for next year's Texas, the problem is that specific defense that Nansen ran didn't have any edges on the field. So what are you doing with Trey Moore? What are you doing with Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke? What are you doing with Colin Simmons? Why are you building a pass-stopping defense that doesn't involve those guys? So it'd have to be something different than that. It could be something similar, but it would have to be a little different.
Well, one of the things that you mention a lot and that gets mentioned a lot, specifically with the SEC, is that size factor. So when we hear about something like this dollar package, where size is being substituted with speed, is that the offset that might make the difference, or is that something you strictly want to implement on those spread happy teams?
That's a good question. I think with the right personnel, you could maybe pull it off against some of the SEC teams. If a team comes out with like 2 tight ends and then they just make a huge pile of big bodies at the line of scrimmage, then your speed is not going to save you. They're just going to run you over. But if they're playing like 11 personnel with 3 receivers, but they want to run the ball with power, and you can kind of outnumber them and play games with a bunch of safeties on the field, I think that can actually work. There's actually been some SEC teams that have done that. Either Ole Miss or Auburn, I think it was Ole Miss last year, played half the year with a safety playing inside linebacker and totally got away with it because of the speed trump size dynamics. You have to be big up front, but there's maybe a little more leeway on the back end than people would think if you're clever enough.
Boys, one of the things that's happening a lot in the chat here is again going back to Quinn's touchdown numbers, and there was some allusions earlier to the running back help that certainly Mac had. I mean, we've got a pretty good stable ourselves. How much is the running game going to affect Quinn's ability to throw the ball now that the playbook is expanding potentially to 100%? We'll start with you, Eric. I haven't heard your voice in a while. Let's hear from Eric.
Yeah, and they're going to throw it a lot to him. I mean, Blue could play slot receiver. He's got good hands. So you're going to want to take advantage of that. There's going to be a lot of vertical space created by vertical routes out in the flats. Wheel routes with him, circle routes with him, I think are going to be open. They'll throw it to CJ Baxter too. Pretty much every running back they've taken since they've been here has pretty good hands. Some guys have had some really unfortunate timing drops. But yeah, I mean, I've seen Blue play wide receiver in high school, at least on the 7-on-7 circuit, and he's about as natural as it gets for a running back. So, and you're going to want to take advantage of the space and his speed. He's a home run threat. So I'm excited. I'm as excited about anybody to see Blue next year with all these other weapons around him.
We also on the call we heard earlier from a source, the running backs are all looking very good. The offensive line is looking outstanding, and the run game in general. I mean, that's partly why they're repping RPO so heavily, is because they can just cause huge problems running outside behind these tackles. With any running back, it sounds like that they rotate in there can find room to run.
Yeah, that guy, he's a high school coach, and he was bragging about the even the freshman running backs. They're fast and they break arm tackles. It's going to be an article on Inside Texas in the morning. I've got it written. I'm just not going to post it this late, but yeah, and the run blocking, he was really raving about DJ Campbell and the offensive tackles. Campbell, he was super high on for his ability to get movement, and really the whole line moving horizontally. He said those guys move with a lot of quickness. They're not lumbering or anything. So, and he's an O-line coach by trade. So it was a very encouraging call based on, and yeah, it's like Ian said, I don't think Sark cares that this stuff is out there because he's just going to build off of it, continually build off of it. I think we'll see some of this in the spring game. If they're showing it to high school coaches in a clinic, they're not being too protective of it.
Well, there's ultimately the issue of stopping it, right? And I think there's a level of hubris, and then there's also just a level of practicality. And Stark doesn't strike me as the guy that walks around with a lot of hubris. Paul, one of the one of the common, not a common trend, but you've seen this from time to time. You'll have collegiate basketball players make their way to a college football team. Sometimes it'll be tight ends. You being the women's game expert, which woman right now in the game would make the best tight end in college football?
I actually don't have her name off the top of my head, but I
wouldn't expect you to. Yeah.
I'm an expert, but I'm more of an expert in like broad sense of expertise. But there is a woman who goes about 6'3", 295.
Oh yeah.
And she would probably translate to a lot of different sports that don't involve much running or cardio. But yeah, she's a large human. I'm blanking on her name right now.
Yeah, she was like Bryant Big Country Reeves down there. I saw some of her highlights the other day, and she was just moving people out with her backside. It was pretty funny to watch.
Kyle Flood would love her.
So we've got Eddie Reese, who's going to be retiring at the end of this season again. Reading about this really posed the question, at least in my mind, and I understand that this is a ridiculous question to ask, but that's basically what I'm here for. Is it safe to say that maybe the University of Texas isn't a football school? Are we a swimming school? Are we a baseball school? I mean, you look at the level of excellence that we've had in some of these other fields, it begs the question, are we strictly a football school based on culture? Or is it a football school simply because they're consistently good? Does that even matter? I'll leave that to you, Paul.
I don't understand.
It's a football school because it's a football state. I mean, that's what selects.
Yeah, I mean, not just that. You're listing non-revenue sports as if they move the needle, right? And then the other part is the passion, right? I mean, how many people are in the stands for a swim meet, right? Obviously, Texas takes a lot of pride in the fact that they have hundreds of national titles, like it seems, and in their combined sports, and that's great. Anything where we participate, Texas fans want to win and do well. And it looks like the coach we hired to replace him is great. He's already in the Hall of Fame, Bob Bowman, and he took Arizona State and basically brought him to a national title. The thing to consider, though, how many programs take swimming seriously in the U.S.? 15? 12? I'm talking about resources, money, scholarships. So chlorine, exactly. So it's a little bit different than like men's basketball, where you can get out into, Iona can field a competitive team in the right year, right? College football, similar. So yeah, I mean, it's a question of what are you asking, individual excellence? Well, you also have to weigh it against how many people take the sport seriously, right? And if you really only have 12 or 15 schools really taking swimming seriously, I mean, it's amazing what Texas swimming represents in terms of excellence, but it's not a level playing field comparing it to other sports.
Baseball is an interesting question. If whether or not Texas is as much or more of a passionate baseball culture as they are football.
Well, I mean, they travel well, but again, it's not going to have the same. It doesn't draw the same money or the same eyeballs. But even for like a basketball school, a lot of times their football program is still a bigger revenue sport for them than their basketball team is, right? So if you just went on a metric of like what sport does the school excel in and take as seriously as the top elite of anyone in the country, probably football is up there with anyone, but I don't know. Baseball might be close. I mean, what is Texas all time?
That's true. I mean, the passion of baseball for the baseball fans for Texas is equal. There's no question. There's just not as many.
But it's kind of a silly question because Texas has. Where's Texas on the all-time wins list in college football? 5th, 6th?
Fourth or fifth. Sure.
Where was it? Where was it until the malaise of the last, the previous 12 years?
Well, I think it was number 1, right? I mean, we were definitely up there. I guess the point of the question is not the answer, but the criteria that you're using. And I think that's what we're really getting at. Is it a revenue thing? Is it a cultural thing? I think it's probably more a cultural thing than it is a revenue thing, because as Ian pointed out, you'll have KU, which obviously is a basketball school unequivocally, but I mean, they're starting to build revenue in their particular football range. So it's a silly question, admittedly. I prefaced it with that. But the real point here is, what is the criteria that we're using to decide these things? And I have to think that cultural is probably the key there. All right,
A&M would say they're a football school, right? But I mean, that's kind of, they don't have much success to back that up.
Well, they're obviously a veterinary school. I don't think anybody's questioning that, but I like that they want to play the game. It's kind of fun. All right, how much of Sark's offense, if 100% implemented, would be closer to a pro offense now that he's getting the players on the roster? This kind of alludes back to that clinic we were talking about earlier about how he's starting to implement some of the pro games, specifically with McDaniels. So this is a question for all three of you. Once we get to fully operational Death Star, how much of this is going to skew to more toward a pro game now that he has the horses in the stable?
So
Definitely
I'll take a crack at this first, if you don't mind. So 30 years ago, there was a divide between college and pro offenses. And the interesting part of that divide is all NFL offenses were the same. Okay. They varied in their influence. Are you at Don Coryell, Bill Walsh, West Coast offense, all that stuff. But pro offenses were pro offenses, right? And you had interchangeable concepts and playbooks. The NFL game is actually closer in its passing concepts to college than college is to the NFL game, if that makes sense. Also, you have different types of athletes playing quarterback in the NFL now. Lamar Jackson's offense is decidedly different from Brock Purdy's offense that he runs in San Francisco. Jalen Hurts runs a very different offense in Philadelphia than Aaron Rodgers was running it in Green Bay. So there is no unified NFL pro offense. When there used to be, frankly, 30 years ago, they were more or less interchangeable. They had different influences and philosophies and concepts, but it was a drop back passing offense. Your quarterback stood strong in the pocket and found the open receiver. Now in the NFL, you have 1,000-yard rushers consistently playing quarterback. And you have, RPOs. You have all sorts of different stuff. And so in some ways, NFL offenses are dumbed down depending on where you are and where they are featured. And then other NFL offenses are incredibly sophisticated, and that's geared around the talent and the ability of the head coach. So how close is Texas to a pro offense? Well, pro offense covers a lot of ground. So it doesn't, that question would have made a lot of sense 30 years ago because we kind of know what we were talking about. But now it's more amorphous. Will the offense be more sophisticated? Yes. Will Quinn have more on his plate? Yes. But it's still going to be a fairly simple decision tree until I think we prove otherwise. I mean, the big jump that Quinn needs to take is going from one or two reads to dropping back, no play action, and finding an open guy and dealing, and based on recognizing the defense and all that kind of stuff. That'll be where he takes the big next step, and we just don't know if he will.
There are a few regards though, like the having a bigger menu of reads, you would maybe at this point call more pro style, because college teams don't usually want to mess with that with their quarterback. Giving the quarterback authority at the line of scrimmage to change plays or to change protections, which is really hard to see as a fan watching on TV, but those things are more pro style. You're probably more likely to see both of those for Quinn. One other thing though is that the pros are more likely to run certain kinds of play action where the routes develop 15, 20 yards down the field, where the route breaks or whatever. And you don't see that as much in college offenses on throws where the ball has to be in a spot on a line deep down the field. And Texas has already done some of that in ways that you don't see at a lot of other schools. And you're probably going to see more of it next year. Stuff where just stuff that they can do because Quinn Ewers has a big arm, right? Stuff that they can do because the receivers can run crisp routes, at certain landmarks down the field that other teams just wouldn't even try because why bother? So there will be some more of that.
Ian, I think we should develop that point because I think it's a common misconception among fans and even commentators about college football. Arm strength isn't demonstrated on most deep routes. It's demonstrated on intermediate routes. So the college game is very short, bomb, but that bomb is going to be air under the ball, guy trying to run under it.
Michael Penix.
Yeah, might even be a post route in between the hashes. You don't have to throw it as far. The NFL game, we're talking about like a 17-yard out, which if you don't have the arm strength to throw that, it's a pick six. Or you sail it up into the stands or it dribbles at the guy's feet. Quinn Ewers can throw that route. And that's an NFL sort of route. You know, it's a 13-yard option route. And that's but on the other side of the field on the far hash, which a lot of defenses strategically in the college game will be like, don't even worry about that flat. They can't attack it. Well, we've seen Quinn repeatedly drop a ball on those little JT Sanders routes where he'd run from the opposite side as tight end and he'd come across. It was almost like a long drag, but it was a deep developing route. And if he caught it early, he'd stop on the sideline and take off up the field. We saw that against Bama. If he caught it a little late, he caught a 20-yard gain as he went out of bounds, right? So Quinn can do that, and that's very NFL. Most college offenses don't have those routes because your quarterback can't throw it. So,
well, with that, and this is again just because I like making stuff up. Given your assessment of where the college game is now the pro game is now in terms of the diversity of offenses, would a player like Vince Young coming out now have more opportunity than he did when he came out?
Yes. There would have been less of a like pigeonholing. I mean, I've heard a million different accounts of what went wrong in Tennessee, but while they ran like some zone read like he did at Texas, they did not build an offense like the Lamar Jackson offense or the Jalen Hurts offense for Vince Young in the NFL. So, I mean, he would be better off right out the gate just from having an opportunity to be in a system like that. Also, he'd have a better chance of being in one of these new wave of Shanahan influenced coaches offenses, and that would help them too. Like, Kyle obviously had RG3. If he ran the RG3 offense with Vince, that would have been better. And then all the other guys that came out of that, like Matt LaFleur and Mike McDaniels and whoever else, Sean McVay, any of those guys would have made more of Vince Young than what he got.
Would Sark have recruited him?
Probably not.
Yeah, he didn't. He just passed on Derek Lagway, and man, Derek Lagway is a better passer at this age than Vince was. So,
yeah, that's a really valid point, Eric. Yeah, it's a good point. All right, I would like for someone to, because I think this is a good question, but I can't really decode it. So this one is for you guys to figure out. Can somebody help me sort this one out?
Put all OU questions to Ian, especially ones with Casey Thompson in them.
Okay, great. Ian, this one's for you.
They did not let Dylan Gabriel walk so that they could start Casey Thompson over Jackson.
Right.
They made their choice to go with Jackson Arnold. You get the sense that maybe he wasn't really that patient. He wanted to get on the field. Young 5-star kid, always has options. Yeah. I think that they're going to just play him and take their lumps like Texas did with Quinn Ewers in 2022 and then try to reap the rewards in 25, maybe probably honestly in 2026 too. Casey will see the field if he's injured, which maybe so.
Well, I would say implicit in this question is that Casey Thompson is better today than Jackson Arnold. Then I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
It might be honestly. It depends on where he's at after getting seriously injured every single year for the last 3 years.
Casey Thompson's demonstrated what he is. We know what his ceiling is, and we know what his floor is. OU's goal is not to win against their non-conference, opponents by, will Casey Thompson show better against Louisiana Monroe? Yeah, because he's a mature quarterback who started a lot of games, right? But it's not just the upside. I don't know that he's a better player than Jackson Arnold right now. I mean, I think some Texas fans still have an elevated opinion of Casey Thompson. I don't think they understand the degree to which Steve Sarkisian was responsible for that elevation. He's got major holes in his game. So,
and
if I was a coordinator, I would welcome coordinating a defense against Casey Thompson because I could design that in about an hour and a half.
Texas fans have a lower impression of Jackson Arnold than they should too, based on his last start his first start ever as a true freshman against the bowl team with a good defense. So I think Jackson Arnold, you got to invest in him now so you can reap the rewards later.
Brett has another question, which I think is well, first of all, he's getting this one for free because he pays for every other one. But this is, I mean, is it this year's best O-line since 05? I mean,
No,
that was a nasty offensive line.
no, but on a technicality.
Go on.
2006, Texas actually had a really good offensive line.
Yeah.
It's the same guys.
They brought back a bunch of those guys, right?
Yeah.
So 2006, they still had Casey Studdard. They still had a bunch of those dudes return, and they were still really good and experienced. So I get the instinct here. The part of the issue, though, fundamentally is we've had at best a mediocre or above average offensive line as our best offensive line since, right? And so it sounds great, but we're actually kind of
last year
sounds better than it is, right?
Last year's line may have also.
It's like when Texas started throwing the forward pass in the 90s, every game Texas quarterbacks were setting records, Texas records, and they'd be like, "Oh, James Brown has now thrown 16 touchdowns on the season, a new Texas record," whatever it is. And you were kind of like, "Okay, that's great," but it's because we didn't.
Okay, good. So what you're establishing here is that we haven't set a rubric for is this better than this. So if that's the case, then let's just be super arbitrary here. Is this year's offensive line anywhere near as nasty as that 05 line? Because those guys were just, and I mean this in the utmost respect, like they were dirty. They got after it. They were mean dudes. I mean, do we have that level of attitude with Kyle Flood? It seems like he's incredibly technically proficient, very, very competent. People are hitting everything they need to hit. But do they have that same vibe, that same mean streak that the 05 team had in terms of the line?
The guy we heard from earlier today would say yes. And he noted that the tackles can get outside of ends on outside zone in a step and just cause huge problems. They're extremely athletic. He was noting that DJ Campbell would get under his guys' pads and just drive them off the ball every snap. They have maybe a higher tipping point of NFL talent and elite athleticism on this line than they've had in all the other lines since 05 and 06. And maybe more than 05 and 06. 05 and 06, like Lyle Sinline and Casey Studdard both ended up having really nice NFL careers. But I think one of them went undrafted and one of them went late because they were not freak athletes. They were just very scrappy and skilled, right?
I mean, the superstar of that line was Justin Blaylock, who was a freak. I think this line could be really good. And so also, let's be honest, different offenses require different attributes. So this is going to be a good pass protecting line, which is really important. And, also it's really easy to run block when Vince Young is your quarterback and you're blocking for Ramonce Taylor and Jamal Charles. And I mean, you're running option. You've got an extra man runner and the quarterback. You're blocking down, which every offensive lineman loves to do. But yeah, I mean, look, bottom line, this could be a top 5 national offensive line. And that's where we want to be.
Oh, yeah.
The best offensive line I can remember seeing in the last half dozen years is that 2020 Alabama line coached by Kyle Flood. That was just beautiful choreography all the way around. It wasn't just the fact that he had 5 stars. He had 5 stars and they were incredibly in sync. It was a thing of beauty. And we got a question from a Big Ten fan who stumbled upon the show. Come on, man. You know that answer's Texas.
Come on, Les. Thank you for joining us.
Come on, buddy.
AJ has asked whether there'll be free pizza, and there will absolutely be free pizza. We have a recruiting question here. How serious is Texas recruiting Duncanville QB Russell? Russell's a baller. So I'm good with either Lacey or Russell. Why not just take both of them? What are we feeling here, Eric?
Yeah, I don't think I have entirely ruled it out just because of numbers. You always want to have 4 quarterbacks, one starting, one that can back up, and hopefully a third that can play in a pinch, and then one developing on the longer curve. After this season, they'll only have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. So, the potential is there for them to take Keelan Russell. He's got a lot of push behind him with recruiting fans right now. He's a nice ball of clay. He's got a strong arm, makes plays behind the line of scrimmage with his legs. Not looking to just run, but he can run as well. He's a better runner than KJ Lacey. KJ Lacey's a good runner. He just doesn't run a whole lot, kind of like Bryce Young. He's taller in the pocket. I don't think he's as quick processing as KJ is. That'll probably come with more reps. So, he's a good quarterback. He's rated highly. He's really moved up. He looked really good in Elite 11 by all accounts. He's at Duncanville. Do they need to pull that card late when trying to flip DeCorian Moore? Maybe, I don't know. But for now, they're gonna wait and see how this thing plays out with Lacey. Lacey was at Auburn last weekend. Watched their scrimmage. He'll be in Austin this week. He's recruiting for Texas. He's been, he's still checking some schools out. So it's tough for me to say that he's 100% committed, but he's pretty heavily bought into Texas. So I'd be a little bit surprised if he flipped, but not entirely, just because he's from Alabama and he's got 2 programs like Alabama and Auburn after him. Ole Miss was after him as well. But I think he committed to Texas for the right reasons, and because of that, he's less likely to decommit.
Do you see the team with Sark, obviously known for quarterback development, because Quinn stayed, because we've got Arch coming in after 2 years of in a learning role? Do you see the chain now, the rotation with quarterbacks being you come in and you sit for at least 2 years? Or is that going to be purely based on the individual talent? It seems to me that would be Sark's ideal, just given the way that he develops his playbook.
Well, he wants experience. We've known that. I think that's something that was lacking the first couple of years in the program, even lacking a little bit still to that degree this year. But I think he's on that line right now. It was an eye opener for me when Mac Jones held off Bryce Young. I was a little bit surprised. I didn't pay as close to that, obviously. I don't follow Alabama that close, but just from being on the outside, I thought Bryce was going to win that job. But watching Mac, you're like, okay, it's clear why this guy's got the job. He's bringing the playbook to life. And the longer you are, and the more experience you have, the quicker you're going to bring the playbook to life. Now, Arch is going to be a star the second he gets on the field. If he comes in week 8 this year to start, he's going to be good. If it's next year, is not going to be the learning curve with Arch. He's different. But I could see a path where Trey Owens starts games for Texas. He's coming in and we're hearing all the right things about him. He's got the confidence for it. He's got the arm to pull off a lot of these throws that Paul and Ian were talking about being more of the pro style game. So I think he's got kind of the assembly line going right now.
Clifton has a question, and I want to unpack this a little bit because obviously we're on the subject of Quinn. It deals with our defensive ends and us finally getting maybe a better pass rush this year. But Quinn's pocket awareness. This is something that has been of criticism. Obviously, the idea of self-sacking. What Clifton is asking here is, will the improved pass rush on our defense, if it is truly improved, help Quinn in this regard? Or is this something that Quinn is just going to have to deal with on his own? Is it a mental game?
I think it would help a little bit. I think the big issue Quinn has is not knowing where to go past his first read has been a problem. And then not having his footwork in sync with his eyes so that when he gets to the second read, are his feet actually set where he can turn and deliver a ball on time, or is the timing all out of whack? A lot of times last year it was out of whack because the footwork wasn't good enough. So a lot of these things are things that he just needs to fix on his own. If there's more frequent reminders in practice, like, hey, that wasn't good enough, and now Trey Moore is patting you on the head and making fun of you in the locker room, it can't hurt, right?
Can I add a little bit to the self-sacking thing?
Yeah, please.
So I love this because it's something that I kind of studied and thought about a lot. And it happens for a lot of reasons. And Ian nailed part of it. The other part is not getting the ball out when you should have. So that's part of what Ian was saying, but it's also, take a profit. You have multiple routes, you know what's going on, and you see a guy break wide open early for an 8-yard gain.
Yeah.
Throw the ball. Because these receivers are talented enough that 8-yard gain could become 25 just because the guy makes a move or does something, makes something happen. That's part of it. The other part of self-sacking is quarterbacks who try to flush outside to try to buy time just reflexively. It's a really bad habit, right? And if you're a good athlete coming out of high school, you can get away with it. But when you play, and actually against mediocre college football teams, you can get away with it as well because they don't have the speed on the edge and the closing speed. When you play a really good defense, those bad habits get you into big trouble. And then the final part of it is dropping your eyes. So good quarterbacks keep their eyes down the field, even as they're feeling pressure. And they also need to understand the difference between I'm getting bumped or a guy's brushing against me, or a flyby, a guy's got a hand on my pads, but he doesn't really have leverage. You can't get me down. You don't need to go anywhere. Just take a step forward and keep your eyes down the field and throw the ball. That only comes with experience, or just guys who are cool as hell, right, in the pocket, and they just keep their eyes down the field. No matter what's happening around them, they have that feel of like, I'm still fine. These guys are still blocked, or they don't have the angle on me. Even though he's free, he can't get me. I have to take a step forward and then deliver the ball. So that's the other subtle stuff that Quinn has to improve on to really eliminate that. But it's an interesting layered sort of phenomenon for quarterbacks. And the ones who can avoid it and the ones who can manage the pocket, even though they're not great athletes, i.e. Tom Brady. If you watch him, his ability to just manipulate in the pocket, the only other guy I can think of in the same zip code is Drew Brees in terms of just moving slightly, and then all of a sudden all the pressure is relieved and he has a clear window. And you're like, he just shuffled a foot and a half and all of a sudden the pressure went away. And he didn't freak out and break out running or anything like that.
We talked a little bit. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Well, just to Rick's point here. Statistically, Quinn was 47th in the nation. That's not where you want your star quarterback to be as far as sack rate. So he was 5.38%. So Washington was 2.04%. That number 2. Oregon was number 1, but I mean that doesn't count. Their passing game is basically handoffs.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's we're not saying it was a killer, but it's not being overblown. That's something he can improve on for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly not nothing. Yeah. I want to jump on what Kevin is saying here because we're kind of bouncing around the quarterback room a little bit, and we talked a lot about this coaching clinic and how the playbook is not expanding, but actually reaching its full potential. With Arch, what can this team do that they couldn't do with Ewers? I mean, what is a realistic ceiling and a floor for Quinn this coming season? I mean, this is the season. So this is it. What are we going to say is the floor and the ceiling for him today? And then also, what is Arch bring to the table that Quinn can't?
I'll tackle it. Well, here's something that we noted early on, that Arch was going to benefit from following Ewers. The offensive line was going to be in place. The skill talent was going to be accumulated. Ewers came early on the rebuild. So first of all, Arch has it easier following Ewers. Ewers helped put the team together with recruiting. Ewers is a sign of the rebirth of Texas. Transfers want to come play in the passing game. He's bringing the Sark schemes to life in Austin. So Arch has benefited following Ewers. And Ewers would have benefited following Arch. There's not something that he can do. It's just that he's going to do these quicker, because part of it is the program around him is going to be better, but part of it is I think that Arch is a prodigy when it comes to processing the game. He's not normal. He's a Manning for a reason. Floor for the season, I think, is playoffs if he stays healthy. The ceiling is Heisman and a national championship.
I think they can run zone read with Arch if they want.
Arch is a better playmaker. Yeah, Arch has more feel. And I mean, I love Quinn, but and I'm glad he came back. I think he's the rightful starter. But we've heard that as far as practice goes, that Arch is more like, and we saw it in Arch's very limited play. He'll take off and make a defense pay with his legs.
I think the answer for Arch is we don't know. Like he hasn't played. So, a year ago, we've done this with Texas guys like Byron Murphy and Devondre Sweat. If a year ago I told you guys on one of these, hey, keep your eyes on Jaden Daniels, LSU quarterback. He's going to win the Heisman and be a top 10 draft pick. In fact, I think he's going to be a top 5 draft pick. You guys would have been like, okay, cool, Paul. And then after the show, you would have been like, what's Paul's deal? What's going on with this guy who's just like, this is a guy as a 4th rounder, right? But he went out and played and he got better. So Arch Manning hasn't played a college football game. So what do we know that he can do? We can guess, we can speculate. I think he's going to be really good, but I don't know how good he's going to be. I mean,
I sense a bet coming between us. I think the dude's going to I think he's going to live up to every bit of the hype, being the number 1 player in the country. I think he's going to be the number 1 overall draft pick.
That would be amazing. I'll take
number 1 overall draft pick. Okay, so get that right here. It's April
I mean,
1st.
he's going to get the benefit of the doubt, right? I mean, if he's just one of the top 3, like Jaden Daniels is right now, I guess, and his last name is Manning, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. No GM's going to want to be the guy that passed on a Manning. His uncles, he's got, if you look at his family, the lowest draft pick in his family is number 2 overall, his grandfather.
That's true.
Well,
You're going to look
number 1
bad.
overall. Nobody's going to pass on a Manning if he's in contention.
Why didn't you take Rookie of the Year, Arch Manning?
Imagine taking, like if there's a Ryan Leaf coming out that year and he's going up against Arch Manning. I mean, come on now.
It's true.
I guess my point, getting back to the question, what can Arch do that Quinn can't? He's bigger, stronger, and a better runner. All the other stuff, you guys are speculating. We don't know. He has not started a college football game. So we're going to find out. And he may blow us all away. But I think his minimum floor is going to be really good.
What do we see just in terms of D Moore? Unlocking the slot, whole new level? That's what Shook Ones wants to know.
Shook Ones. That's old school.
Yeah.
Mob Deep. You guys need to listen to that rap if you never heard it.
Oh, we know that. Well, 2 of us know it. DeAndre Moore. Yeah, I mean, he's having a good spring. He's a good slot, definitely a bigger vertical threat than Jordan Whittington was. Despite Jordan's straight line speed, he didn't really have the ball skills down the field. We've talked about that before on this. Moore's catching the ball more consistently than he did last spring. That was a big part of it. He's just matured in every way, understanding what the offense is requiring him to do. Better job running routes, setting up his DBs better, coming into his own. But the competition isn't going to stop for him. He's got to have a great August to cement playing time. You got Silas Bolden coming in May. They're kind of heavy on outside receivers. If Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond, Ryan Wingo, and Jonte Cook, all those guys, with the exception of probably Wingo, and Wingo could probably do it just because he's a freak. Golden, Bond, and Cook can all play slot receiver too. So it's kind of he's got to be one of the best 4 or 5 to really get playing time. And I think Wingo's going to have to play. I know we all know Sark's hesitant to rotate receivers. Just the stuff that they're saying behind the scenes about the guy, the stuff I've seen in person. I mean, they're going to have to play him too. So it's going to be interesting to see how wide receiver plays out when the lights come on in September.
Back to Quinn real quick. I know we're wrapping up to the end of the time here, but are we going to let him run this year? I mean, that seems to be the big scary thing, right? I mean, is that an issue?
Yeah,
it'd be better if he didn't do it a lot. I mean, he's
right.
I mean, he's trying to gain weight to take hits better, but man, he left the pocket and took some hits last year, and every time I'd be like, I don't think that was a win in the long term, and eventually it caught up to him. There's no way he's going to get that big in time for the season. So stepping up in the pocket and checking down to Jaden Blue would probably be better, but he'll do it some. It's part of his game, and he throws really well on the move. So, and he can be very effective at it at times. So
If you saw a couple of those long runs, a defensive guy didn't even touch him they all had their backs turned, right? They're in man coverage, and he just ran straight down the field. I mean, so
Yep.
he took what was there. Those were smart. Those were heady runs. Those were heady decisions of Quinn to take what he had.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
No, he's a good straight line athlete, or at least better than what most people think, because he's known for being a pocket passer.
Yeah,
I think. I mean, there's no defense that's going to assign a spy to Quinn Ewers. So there's going to be times when he drops back with the threats that Texas has at receiver. It's just going to be a wide open field, and 3rd and 5, he's going to take off. He's got to learn how to protect himself and not run awkwardly. Get down. No one thinks less of you, Quinn. Just get down. And a lot of people recommend the slide. I am against the slide. All it takes is one guy who decides he wants to put your starting quarterback out of the game, and that slide, your upper body is elevated with your head and chest and neck exposed while you're sliding dive every single time. That you need to practice it, and that's what you need to do. I am not a slide guy, because all you need is one dude to make a business decision, and your starting quarterback is gone.
Yeah, that TCU defender on Dylan Gabriel 2 seasons ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same guy put out 2 different quarterbacks on slides doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Do we have the best running back room in the nation?
Definitely the best one in the county.
Okay, good. I'll take it. I need to figure out how to unban someone, because I was about to put one of our favorites, David Keith Williams, on there.
You banned David.
I know. As I pushed to star, the thing went up, and I pushed it, and it was banned. So, my gosh, he's awesome. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I'm really sorry, David.
He's doing push-ups in anger right now.
I know. You're an absolute gem, and I messed up so bad. All right, we're going to talk to my producer about that, try to get that figured out.
That's where you cut yourself off. You should just start randomly and cut yourself off.
That's true. This is where I just quit. I mean, that guy's so good.
I'll see a true alpha would never have done that.
That's true. That is not an alpha move. I really apologize. All right. Okay, real quick, Paul, you are our women's basketball expert. Who do you have winning the championship?
Freaking Iowa. Caitlin Martin.